I was having dinner the other night with friends downtown, and the topic of limitations came up. And this is just casual banter among friends, but I want to share some of it with you. We talked about the notion that every artist has limitations. I'm continually inventorying mine. I'd like to be able to draw better with more succinctness, more simplicity. I'd like to be able to use tertiary color more evocatively. There are certain compositional devices with which I feel comfortable, which I would like to expand from or expand within. And even the act of putting paint down, the physical making of marks, I would like to continue to develop my lexicon of mark making with different implements, different ways of putting paint down, different mediums, even painting with my left hand. I'm an avid student of art history, and I look and read as much as I possibly can. I have a real hunger for learning about painting that came before me. And I want to continue to learn and focus even more on non-Western painting. And we went on to talk about that when one is cognizant of limits, it offers a great deal of spaciousness and comfort and permission. Because perhaps it's the intensification, the concentration of those limits that give our work its truth and its humanity and its vigor and content. It's that continual longing to break from those inescapable things, those limits, to get better, that I'll never be good enough, that it's the longing to get better, the longing to speak more clearly, more directly with less, that keeps me going. It's very comforting, these notions. And so for me, it's not the question, are there limitations? The question for me is do I inhabit my limitations? And I think that's the really important point. One must utterly inhabit their work. This is the newest 13-foot painting in my studio, and in some of the previous videos you've probably heard me chatter about this painting as being finished, and this time it's for real. This is the final painting. It is finished. It's called Reverie, and it's I like those one-word titles for these big paintings. And this is a good example of what I call stacking space. I often talk about pictorial space as being akin to playing cards scattered out on a table, overlapping one another. I'll often start toward the top of the painting with thin layers, and then I work my way down in stages, letting each new layer overlap the previous layer slightly, like steps. So I step further down, working all the way down to the bottom, with the lower layers being the thickest and therefore the closest to the viewer. So a sensation of steps going up and away, which I think very much emulates the way we view nature. The bottom of the painting correlates to the area around our feet, whereas the top of the painting, I think, reflects the area around our heads. That's the top and bottom premise that Leo Steinberg writes about. This is also composed with very careful arrangements of verticals and horizontals. The verticals relating to the sides of the painting, and the horizontals echoing the top and the bottom. And when the two intersect, they release a little detonation of energy, which I think moves you through the painting and hopefully creates a sense of expansion and contraction that keeps the painting breathing and alive. So this very much, I think, positions me in nature painting, even though it's highly abstracted. And as I've said before, I don't view abstraction as a style. I view abstraction only as a process, as a thing to do. It's impossible for me to say to you that I'm going to make an abstract painting. That's like me saying, watch, I'm going to do an imitation of breathing. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It has to have a kernel of some verifiable physical experience that I know. And for me, it comes from the landscape, a very specific landscape. So in the end, you have a highly abstracted image, which also has a very deep-rooted sense of location and placement and geography without being specific at all. I use very thick oil paint in my work, not just because I like the way it looks, and I do. I love the notion of excess and effusiveness and going completely overboard. Perhaps a Southern trait, and indeed one of my teachers used to tell me sometimes too much is just right. I make my living going overboard. But I also use really thick paint to suggest structure over appearance, to suggest a nascent image being argued with and grappled with, stretched and pulled and molded right before your eyes. Raw. No secrets, no tricks, no illusions. Everything is right there, right in front of you, being made as you look at it, right before your eyes. And in fact, it's incomplete without your eyes. The properties of the paint hopefully implicate the viewer in the perceptual envelope of the painting, requiring the viewer to help finish the painting, as opposed to gazing upon something highly calibrated and polished from afar. These are not new ideas. These are just ideas I value very much and employ in my work. And I look at mosaics a lot for this reason. The idea that the integrity of the image is dependent upon hundreds, if not thousands, of individual decisions, very, very carefully aligned to create a whole. Otherwise, if one thing's amiss, the entire burrito just falls apart. And Milton Resnick is another good example here. Hundreds and hundreds of modulations of color and tone over a long period of time to suggest air, an atmosphere where there was none before. And to give us a hum. There's a hum, a deeply satisfying hum, which to me is what I call the third thing. The painting is a thing, I'm the second thing, and together we have to create the third thing, that elusive third thing. It's absolutely imperative. It must be. Otherwise, the painting just doesn't work. And it's very hard to get, but God, when you do, that third thing is just there's nothing like it. For almost the entire time I've lived and worked here in New York City, almost 25 years, I've been obsessed with a little landscape painting at the Metropolitan Museum of Art called Souvenir at Handeck, painted in 1858 by the Swiss landscape painter Alexandre Calame, who lived from 1810 to 1864. This is not a painting that calls attention to itself. It's quite modest. It's not a game changer of a painting, and it's not one of those one-hit experiences that one can have with a painting, but a series of repeated encounters over many, many years allowed this painting to get under my skin, and it's taught me so very much about composing in a picture. I love the muscularity of the rocks in the foreground and how they beckon your eye through a series of serpentine movements back into the guts of the painting. The deliquescence of the trees and the mist and the clouds as they move up into the sky. I love the composition based largely on lights and darks. The interior light, which promulgates a whole range of emotions. I love the gentle bending of the alpine trees the sensation of some sort of force of nature, something about to happen or something that's just happened. And the best part to me is the composition, which is held together by a very, very delicate lattice work of shapes, each one resting on the next in a series of zigzags, much akin to a suspension bridge. And every time we're driving over the Brooklyn Bridge or the Manhattan Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge, whatever it is, I think of this painting. I should probably be focusing on the road, I know, but I think of this painting. And the notion that if one thing were to move or shift, the entire integrity of the composition would be compromised. And it's taught me very much about shapes and how they relate, how they interlock, how they barely touch one another or overlap, to form a suspension which drives and creates a murmur of the entire thing. It creates the life of the entire composition. This is not anything new. Many, many painters compose this way, but I like looking at this idea vis-a-vis this painting.